Hey there! I'm Sarah A. Chrisman, the author of the Tales of Chetzemoka, and today I'm going to tell you a little bit about a few of the casual and work women's garments that come up in my stories. A lot of people are drawn to ballroom or court fashions when looking back on a given period of history, but as a general rule, people spend far more of their lives at home than out dancing or at the opera. It's an interesting challenge for clothing historians that the most common clothes people wear the vast majority of the time are actually the least likely to survive through history. Special occasion clothes like wedding dresses and ball gowns, or prom dresses, which are the modern equivalent of ball gowns, these things often get carefully saved and lovingly packed away. The things we wear every day, on the other hand, will often get worn until they are absolutely worn out and there's nothing left of them. The ones that do survive, though, give us a wonderful view of what everyday life was like in the past. In most of the at-home scenes in my books, especially the at-home evening or early in the day scenes, the women are wearing some variant of this garment. And this is actually the antique original that I copied to get the pattern for the dress I'm wearing now. So this is the same dress, just in different fabric. This is the new one I made, and this is the one from the 1800s. And this has a lot of names. It is called a wrapper. It's also called a house dress. It's also called a tea gown. And if that's not confusing enough, there's an entirely different garment that also got called a tea gown. I've got one of those in here. I'll come back to that in a minute, but for now let's stick to this one. If you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you've probably noticed that a lot of the dresses I tend to wear every day are all this same dress. They're just this dress in different fabrics. And the fun thing about fabrics in the 19th century is that the cheapest ones tended to be the flashiest ones. See, this is a very cheap garment, but it's got a pretty loud pattern on it. And the reason for that is that when a factory had fabric that had any sort of error or irregularity in it, they would cover that up with a flashy pattern, and then it would go on sale for pretty cheap. The fabrics that turned out perfectly, they would save for higher-end sales and higher-end garments. So not everyone realizes that in Victorian clothing, the brightest and the cheeriest tends to be the cheapest, which is kind of fun. The fabrics that I use to make my wrappers are all copies of various 19th century designs. And I get them from a site called reproductionfabrics.com, if you so. There are a few different things that make it so convenient. In the first place, it's not fitted. So there's very little measuring that goes on with this. It's just tied at the waist. You can see on the one I'm wearing. So to make it, you don't have to measure very much, and that makes it a lot easier to create than something that has to be very carefully measured, like a more formal garment. And another thing about it not being fitted means that they could be one size fits all. This is one of the very first one size fits all women's garments in the 19th century. And in Delivery Delayed, when Lizzie gets caught out in a thunderstorm and gets soaking wet and has to borrow Nurse McCoy's wrapper, she feels a little weird about wearing Nurse McCoy's clothing, and I would too, but it's easier to do that than later on in the story when McCoy gets dragged to a ball and has to borrow Rachel's ball dress. She has to tack on fabric in some places, and she's swamped by the dress in others, and yeah. It was easier for Lizzie to borrow the wrapper. than for a ball gown to be borrowed. And these, because they were available in one-size-fits-all, shops loved carrying them because they didn't have to stock so many. Also, catalogs tended to carry them. You'll find these in some of the really early Sears and Roebuck catalogs and also the early Montgomery Ward catalogs. This one actually has a catalog stamp on it, but it doesn't match the numbering of Sears and Roebuck or Montgomery Ward. So it's some other company, probably one that went out of business long, long ago. These are also very easy to wash. When Lizzie borrows Nurse McCoy's wrapper and she's feeling weird about it, one of the things she notices is that it smells very strongly of ivory soap. Because it's unfitted, there is no boning that has to be taken out for it to be washed. And because it's so soft and it has a loud pattern that's going to cover up any wrinkles anyways, you don't even have to iron this unless you're really obsessed with ironing. You can just let this dry and then put it on. So it's very convenient that way too. So I told you I would come back to the other garment that's also called a tea gown that's very different. And that's this one. Now, in Love Will Find a Wheel, there's a scene where Addie thinks that she thinks she hears Jacob coming up the stairs. And she laments, "Oh, why did I wear this tired old wrapper instead of my pretty boudoir tea gown?" This is a boudoir tea gown. And it is very, very pretty. I don't yet have a copy of this. I haven't made one. I'm not Superwoman. I can't do every single thing on earth. But I will eventually make one. It is much prettier and showier than the house dresses. It has more lace, and it's a slightly more delicate fabric. So this isn't one you would wear doing chores. This is one you'll wear when you are lounging about, reading, or if a really close friend comes over for tea, this would be one that might be worn for that. Another garment that falls into the same category as the boudoir tea gowns is this one. This is the only one I have, one that I made, but I don't have an antique original because I actually copied this from a painting. And this is a warm little jacket. The reason I say it falls into the same category as the boudoir tea gowns is that because of the velvet and the feathers, it would be really hard to wash. So again, this is not one to wear doing chores. This is one to wear while I'm writing, or again, having tea with a friend. And the reason I prioritized this one is that our house tends to be rather cold because we economize on heating fuel quite frequently. And so I needed something to keep me warm while I write. And since writing is how I spend most of my time every day, I wanted to be comfortable while I do it. Now, the last garment I'm going to show you today takes us very much back into the realm of rough wear for when you're doing chores. This is a work dress from the turn of the 20th century. This is a hard-working dress. I'm sure Nurse McCoy had one of these. This particular antique one actually even has, it managed to survive even though it has these. There are some burn marks. I don't know if you can see those, but there's little scorch marks from some time when it got too close to a fire. And I have a copy of this one that I wear for doing outside work. I've worn it camping, I've worn it hiking, and it is a tough, tough dress. It is also brilliantly made because you can see all the pleats, lots and lots of pleats. And usually when sewing, making pleats is the world's most tedious task. It is a matter of measure, 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 I am going to go insane. I am going to go insane. But the woman who made this at the end of the 19th century was a genius. Genius. Blessed to be her memory. Because she worked out that with stripes, all she had to do was run a strong string through every other stripe, and then when she gathered it up, her pleats were already made for her, which is brilliant. It's utterly brilliant. And that sort of thing is exactly why I love studying antique garments, and just why I love studying artifacts in general and the things that people of the 19th century left behind for us to learn from, because they were pretty clever cookies and there's a lot we can all learn from them, and I try to incorporate all of that into my books because I like to share it with people. Thank you for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a nice thumbs up and remember to tell your friends about my books. Happy reading!